the so-called 1 to 2 page assignments. We still have about 10 or so, more than 10 indeed, who have not made right their submissions. I'm not asking any of the 10 to respond, but I'm asking some observations from the class before I say what I'm thinking about this, about 10. Especially this, it's me trying to discover them classly. None of them has even told me, Mwalimu, because of A, B, and C, I'm delayed to submit. Silvanus.
Yes, Daktari. Now,
Yes.
I sent mine as you were talking. I was trying to look at the charts I sent on WhatsApp, and you left me on gray tick.
Pardon?
I sent through the WhatsApp on the 2nd of June. They ticked me, meaning you have not opened the work.
Are you sure?
Yes, I sent on 2nd of June.
Silvanus Gitari. So I'm noting that. I'll be at it. Silvanus Gitari. So you send by WhatsApp, eh?
Yes, I've even sent another message so that it can come there on top.
No, if it arrived, I should be able, because I've checked actually anything, not unless you sent to the wrong number, but I've checked more or less everything.
It was on gray tick, meaning you did not open.
I did not open.
Yes, you left me on gray tick.
You'll be able to look at it. Right. So
Or
that is
I sent to the wrong number. Your number ends with 89.
Yes, but not all numbers that end with 89 are mine.
And starts with 31.
I heard you.
Yes.
I've heard you.
Thank
Osanya?
you.
Good evening, Daktari.
Good evening to you.
I also sent mine on your WhatsApp.
Osanya?
Yes.
And then do you have any evidence that I've not received it? Like Gatari, who suspects I've not received. Do you suspect I've not received it?
Yes, I sent it on 1st June.
No,
let me
what I'm
highlight
asking,
let me highlight it again.
No, what I'm asking, because I've checked through all those sources through emails. What I'm asking, do you have any indication, like Silvanus, that your work has not been picked up?
Yes, great ticks.
Great ticks. So
Yeah.
This is Osanya MW, correct. Cindy?
Daktari, I was asking if you received mine.
No, I cannot them off. I cannot them off. I think I've received yours.
Okay.
You know what I'm trying to say? No, don't ask me whether I've received yours, because I may not have the materials before me. What I know, I have about 36 received, and I have about 4 who sent on email, but I've already responded to them that they sent links that cannot open on my side. Instead of sending attachments, they sent links that cannot be opened on my side. And I've already notified the 4, I think, personally on email still. So what I'm addressing is there anybody who suspects, like Silvanus and Osanya, they have put their case quite clearly. Is there anybody who suspects this has come and has not been checked? Ngunzi?
Yes, I suspect that mine was not received.
Ngunzi, yours has been received. I think the name seems to sound clear in my mind.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yes.
mine, Daktari Juliet, I sent via email.
Yeah, anybody who sent via email, if you have not received a message via email indicating that it can't open, it is well received.
I sent on the 2nd of June via email, but
Waruku, I have yours. I think that name is clear in me. Waiter,
okay.
Can see Waiter's hand.
Yes, good evening, Daktari.
Good evening to you.
I sent mine via WhatsApp. Not sure whether you received it. I've not received any acknowledgement.
Right. So what I could say, unless somebody suspects his or hers has not been received, maybe after this, be able to, let me just see. Let me see what I can do. Let me see. Yes. I think, do people mind if I read through the names? Do people mind?
Please
Because
do.
of the
Please
list.
do.
Just read.
We don't mind. We don't mind, Daktari.
Wekesa
Alright.
mind.
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
don't mind in bold.
Okay. So the following names are on record I have received. I'll pass through some. I may just read one name. Cindy, Boaz, Leah, Helen, Muku, Stella Sanya, Jimmy Sanya, Ruth Ingosi, Francis Ochami, Florence Macho, Osanya Milton, Paula Mata, Silvanos Getare. Yeah, Silvanos Getare is there. It is received. Meshak Sindani, Meshak Sindani, Nyabere Samuel, Jenna Shugwe, Juliet Afande, Evans Lusasi, Esther, is it Esther Jane Atieno, Rhoda Ocheng, Brenda Kinyi, Sarah Ngachi, Taslin Otieno, Franklin Onchana, where am I? Yes, Juliana Magomere, Zipporah, Anne Kanyaru, Yvonne, Josephine Sylvia, Brian Mwenda Kiambi, Christopher Wekesa, Henry Moseti, Triza Monica Wakoli, Molina Nyango, Stephen Ondimu, Faith Nzuki, Regina Whiter. Those ones are on record, having been received, the ones I've read through. There are about 3-4 that I've already, the ones I've indicated, I've written to them that they sent links that cannot open. Now, Getare, why it is possible that, did you send also via email?
No, WhatsApp.
Only WhatsApp, eh?
Only WhatsApp.
Then there must be a problem maybe on notification, because what I'm reading not just names, I'm reading actual works, because the works have been downloaded and kept in a file. Eh?
Oh.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
what I'm
Daktari.
reading is not just names I saw, but I'm reading the works that have already, the assignments downloaded and are on file.
Yeah, I've also
Yes.
had my name, Daktari.
You've also had, eh?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. So you notice with that, I say this is about 37 items, meaning from an expected class of about 49, you can see slightly over 10 have not, which is not very good, very good. So I think you can hear me, you hear what I'm trying to indicate, not very good. So any comments, please? Because I'm about to say something about that. Any comments?
Hi, Dr.
Yes?
Hello. Yeah, this
Is somebody
Caroline.
talking?
Yes.
I remember, Caroline,
Hello?
I've sent a message to you. You must have read your email.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm requesting you don't discuss the the content of the email here,
Yeah.
because I think there are certain names that ring in mind. I've sent emails to them. Caroline is one of them. Judy Minor?
Yes, good evening, Dr. Kegode.
Good evening to you.
Okay, my apology. I have been working on my assignment.
Yes.
And I think I underestimated that the amount of maybe research that I needed to put in. So I think for me, I was to reach out and just request you to bear with me as I continue to, so that I give something that is well done. And it's been a busy season on my part, but it is just an apology that I have not submitted my assignment yet, but I am working on it.
All right, Judy, I've heard you. Anybody else?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so I think, is that all? That's all. Now, Maureen, I see your hand up. Maureen,
Yes.
you are the one of those that have sent an email. I remember that name.
Okay, let me send you via WhatsApp. Thank you.
Yeah, I've sent you an email. Yeah, there are those names that ring in my mind that I've sent. When they raise up their hands, I'm able to see. So you understand? I'm about to say that I think latest by the close of tomorrow, because you see quite a bit of time has moved and we want to move into some more demanding tasks. So we want to say that latest by the close of tomorrow, I can't say today because we are in class today. Latest by the close of tomorrow, I think anybody will not have sent in an assignment, and then it is bad. It is just bad. Othello?
Thank you, Dr. I have not been able to reach you by email. I've sent you several emails in the past, but I have not been able to reach you. And the assignment, when you spoke about the assignment, I thought it's something that you are still planning to put on the portal. I checked the portal, I didn't see it. So it's like maybe registration problem. I was not able to access and not able to even see the assignment. I go to the portal, I don't see any assignment.
Maybe get in touch with your colleagues and follow up with the WhatsApp platform. I think your concerns should be addressed.
Okay.
Through those two possibilities. That okay, Othello?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think that one is done then. I'm thinking of making a bit of two people hosts. Yes, just a few more. Now, so we now focus on our class of this evening. I hope the slides are projected towards you. The slides projected towards you? Any response?
Not yet.
Not yet, correct. Then let's project them afresh. What happened? Let's just project them afresh in case they have not. Right. Just a moment. Okay. Yeah, I don't know why I imagined that I had already projected. Right. Are they there? Not yet?
It's projecting. Yes, put on slide mode.
Are we okay now?
Yeah. No, it's okay.
Or not yet picked?
No, it's there now.
Is there? Yeah, some of these network issues, they could take time before they are projected. So
Maybe
I think
you
it's there
put on
now.
slide mode.
Is that okay?
Yes, yes, amazing.
I think we are set. All right, so I have very few slides today, and I'll be explaining towards the end why few slides so that we get what we intend to do after. So as projected before, we are on our third series of lectures in ELP 617, our course on technology and the 21st century pedagogy. This week into next week, we begin discussions on policy issues as regards technology and the 21st century technology, pedagogy. We are going to center very much on policy infrastructure as regards technology in education, in teaching learning. So those are the issues we're going to be looking into. So the present short lecture is supposed to give an introductory understanding towards the general and specific policy infrastructure on technology in education. General in the sense that we will look at the general issues that need to be looked into when considering policy on technology infrastructure in education. Specific in the sense that we are going to try and handle very specific policy issues. For example, we'll be able to handle policy issues at the international level. Then we'll handle policy issues at the regional level, very much African Union level. And then we'll come down and handle policy issues as regards the country, as it were. So that is what I mean by general and specific policy infrastructure on technology in education. To begin us off, we would like to make some reflections about what is before us. For our reflection today, I want us to think about technology as a God-given gift through which we express our creativity, our beauty, and the beauty of the universe. I would like us to reflect on technology as a tool, as a vessel through which we express our creativity and our beauty. You know, when we express our creativity, I would like us to reflect on the fact that creativity as a gift through technology, we are expressing something deep within us. And this thing that is deep within us is not of our own making, but if you like, the making of the Creator himself. Combined with this, when I talk about our beauty, then technology becomes an expression of our entire being. That's what we mean by expression of our beauty. Technology as an expression of our entire being as our very being. Can two people in turns read through the two scripture readings in a very reflective mode? Any volunteer? Any volunteer? Yes, Othello.
We are looking at Acts 7
Othello and Frank, you will read in turn. So beginning with Othello.
Yeah, we are just looking at these two scriptures, Acts 7:22 and then Exodus 31. That is for my colleague. Which one are we reading?
Read the first one, Othello, read the one of Acts, and let Ochana, the second hand that was raised, read Exodus.
Okay. Moses was educated. This is Acts 7:22. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action.
Very well. The next reader. The next reader.
Yes. Then the Lord said to Moses, "See, I have chosen Bezalel son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God with skill, ability, and knowledge in all kinds of crafts, to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of craftsmanship." That's
Very
the
well.
end.
Thank you very much, Onchana. So, dear friends, we are reflecting on those two readings, and I'm trying to put it before ourselves that I would like us to look at technology as that deeper expression of the creativity, the power of creativity in us. Creativity, the gift of God Himself. Technology as an expression of our inner beauty. Inner beauty as the craftsmanship of God Himself. Inner beauty in the sense that as an expression of our inner being. Think about the work of an architectural piece, the work of an architecture. I mean, the work of an architect. Think about a people somewhere, they want to construct a chapel, they want to construct a church, they want to construct whatever building. And the idea is this professional who puts this on paper is told that put down a building, put down a church building that should manifest ABCD, that should manifest, Thanksgiving, for example, that should manifest, a sense of gratitude. This man, this woman, I'm imagining he or she sits down, reflects, and when he puts his hand on paper, on pencil, on paper, he puts on that paper, the fruits of his or her reflections, the fruits of his or her inner being. That's why we're saying that when we use technology, we are expressing a sense of our creativity. And I want you to join up this argument. As you express your sense of creativity, you are not expressing something of your own effort, but you are expressing something of the gift of God, creativity. When this artist puts pen on paper and draws, he or she is expressing his or her inner beauty. He is expressing inner wisdom, the way he or she sees reality. You get that sense from the reading of Exodus. You get that sense from the reading of Exodus. You get it in the sense that the writer says, "And then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have chosen Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah." So it seems God places his gifts in us, in our natural environments. And I have filled him with the Spirit of God. So this creativity, this expression, when a teacher goes to class, when an instructor goes before an audience, we have said time without number, it is not just the issue of the content you are going to teach, but it is the issue of the how you are going to teach it. So the how involves our creativity. The way we will touch technology, remember I indicated much earlier that when we are talking about technology, we begin from the remotest understanding of technology. Whether you are talking about chalkboard and piece of chalk, you are talking about whiteboard and a whiteboard marker, you know, that's the technology before you. Listen to those words. And have filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skill. So as we move out to touch technology, so that technology can aid us in pedagogy, in the how we will deliver the content, we are doing this within the purview of the gifts planted in us. That's why we talk about creativity. We summon the gift of creativity. We summon the gifts deeply rooted in us. And we use these gifts to contribute to the how. We already have the what. The curriculum designs may have drawn before us the what to teach. But occasionally, curriculum design, though even if they attempt, they cannot be able to succeed to put on paper the how to the extent that they can exhaust that how. Rather, this is rooted for us who are Christians, it is rooted within our understanding and appreciation of the Spirit of God, the wisdom of God, the understanding of God, the knowledge of God, and with all the skills that will be found in a teacher as he or she stands before an audience that we will call learners. He puts these gifts in us, the element of creativity in us, so that we can make those artistic designs. He says in Exodus, for the work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of crafts. Dear people and my dear students, we touch something greater than gold, silver, and bronze, especially for those of us who have received this unique gift of being teachers. We attend to something bigger than gold. We attend to something bigger than silver, bigger than bronze. If you like, we attend to human beings who are irrepeatable subjects of unestimable value. We attend to human beings not just with the flesh and blood, but we attend to human beings in whom the image and likeness of God resides, who are created in the image and likeness of God. We attend to human beings who are learners, whose potential we can never estimate. My students and the colleagues have known me. Occasionally, I greet people and I make a philosophical joke with them. I normally tell them that I greet you not for who you are, but I greet you for whom you are likely to be. Just to signal that in every human being lies huge potentials, more huge when we consider a learner, more huge when we consider a learner. Now, these gifts that we are talking about, that are spread across the universe and in different human beings, and these gifts, part of them is what we are calling technology. This is why when the Acts of Apostles is written in the 7th chapter, verse 22, we get those words. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. Meaning, after these gifts are planted in us, these gifts, these talents, these kinds of knowledge skills, they are planted within us, within the life situation that we find ourselves in. And through those gifts, he touches the universe. Dear friends, reflect on those words. Reflect on the extent to which technology can be understood as an expression of creativity and our inner beauty. In other words, this reflection is supposed to help us appreciate the place of technology in our lives as instructors, and never to collapse into this perception of technology as simply something negative. Moses receives and is educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and it is through that instrumentation that he's enabled to be sent to the highest authority in Egypt. Bezalel is filled with all wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and with his skills, so that later he's used to construct that which the author of all things would like be constructed. That appreciation of technology is what in turn is supposed to help us in our duty of state, wherever we find ourselves, to penetrate the policy infrastructure that we find ourselves in, so that this policy infrastructure should enable us to recreate the world into a better order, so that truly we who are created in the image and likeness of God can be of use in recreating the world. 2, 3 observations, then we begin off. Anybody? Any hand? Yes, Othello.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that human beings, the sad thing is about us is that those people who do not know God, they have even been, God has given them the wisdom that they have to do, to create things, to invent, to craft things. And God, for me, God just gave us a fraction of his wisdom, a fraction of his intelligence, which he gave to us. And then we become crazy with it. When we invent aeroplanes, invent computers, smartphones, and all these things, we think that this is our own effort. We are doing this by our own effort. It's the intelligence that God has given to us that is making us to do all these things, that give us a small part of his intelligence. And there's a story I wanted to tell in our last class, but I wasn't able. There's something that is it's amazing and it's so fascinating for me. I see God in space, and I looked at the spacecraft that have been sent to space. There are some 2 spacecraft which are still exploring the universe. They have gone outside of the solar system of ours, and they are still exploring since the 70s. And also, when I first heard that, some years ago, I heard that there was this spacecraft called New Horizons, which they were sending to space in 2016. They were saying that this thing was going to, 2006. So they said it was going to last for, it was going to Pluto, it was going to take 9 years. So I was just looking at it as a joke. I said, what do they mean? This thing has been sent in 2006 and it's going to Pluto for 9 years. That is a long way. And then that thing arrived in 2015. Can you imagine? It arrived in 2015. And they say it was the fastest object ever sent from the Earth to go to space. It was traveling by 58,500 miles per second. not per minute. Imagine 58,000. If you look at the speeds there, it's mind-boggling. You can't even measure it. So that's why I see God. When you look at the universe, you can see God in the universe because He's the only one who knows how big this universe is. Human beings will never know because we don't have that mind of God. We cannot reach there. We are not capable of actually knowing, understanding God completely. Thank you.
Very well, very well. Madian.
Thank you very much. Two things. The first one is that, Dr. today I have had one new word, and I've wondered why I've not heard it before, where you said human being is irrepeatable. Irrepeatable. I think I'll write that down as a word that I've learned from you today. The second one is, I like that you've even gone to the Bible to see the element of creativity. And why this course is particularly interesting to me is that in the public health space right now, the question is, how can we innovatively, which I want to maybe use synonymously with the creativity I'm seeing here in the Bible, how can we innovatively build capacities, which essentially innovatively means probably use technology to be able to reach more people and reach it in the kind of way that is shown in Exodus, to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze. I think the reflection then, in the end, I want to evaluate our capacity building instruction to see whether we are essentially working to bring gold, silver, and bronze. Asante sana and over.
Thank you very much. Amata. Amata.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. And good evening, all.
Good evening to you.
I'm very touched with this devotion, and I have a question which is lingering in my mind, and this is the question. Okay, just before the question, I'm asking myself how we can use technology to honor God. In this, I believe that as God's creation, technology is a blessing to us. But I'm trying to think of humankind or human beings trying maybe today and maybe in the near future, trying to come up with aspects of maybe replacing God's work with technology. And I believe that is will maybe end up, human beings end up being rebellious to God's creation. So as Christians, I tend to ask myself, are we using, or how can we use technology to honor God? Thank you.
Very well, very well. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, you created us in your image and likeness, and you continuously summon us to yourself through the talents and the gifts that you bestow on us. In whatever we do, using the gifts you've given us, we touch the technology through the things that you've created all around us in a struggle really to perfect the image and likeness that you created in us. For us who are teachers, dear Father, you place learners before us. You order us as teachers to touch the potentials within them, that touching them and touching technology, we may bring to fruition that greater thing that you've placed in the hearts and the lives of these young ones. Grant us your spirit to evermore daily discover that these learners stand before us, sit before us as impossible possibilities. And by touching the gifts you've given us and by the use of technology, as we've always prayed, God, grant that we may burn ourselves so that we help these young people become what you intended them to be. Grant this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. So, dear friends, we embark on our discussions today on this topic. And generally, the terrain of our discussions through this topic, which I've indicated to you, is supposed to take us through this week into next week. It has about 4 elements, if you like, 3 elements majorly. The first element is to discuss a general status position, to appreciate the general status position on the place of ICTs in education in Africa, information communication technologies in education in Africa, just to look at the general status, the general position of ICTs in education in Africa. That is going to be majorly what we discuss this evening. Thereafter, into next week, we're going to look at 3 things. At the international level, we'd like to look at the UNESCO's policy infrastructure, the policy guidelines around education and ICT given to us by UNESCO. UNESCO is a major body that addresses us within the terrain of education. So it becomes an authoritative body to address us on matters, technology, and education. The focus of our discussion when we look at the UNESCO's policy guidelines would be to answer the question, why do we need policy on ICT issues in education? Why should we have policy on ICT issues in education? Why leave it to simply guesses on what we think we should do? So that will be our first consideration, UNESCO policy guidelines that will give us more or less, if you like, an international viewpoint, a global viewpoint around ICT issues in education. From that universalist view, we'll now come down to look at the African Union policy guidelines. We'll be trying to say, especially in the light of the so-called 2063 agenda, African Union 2063, the study focus here would be to look at capacity building, appropriation, and adoption of the digital technologies for digital education in Africa. So we'll be asking ourselves the question, what is the policy framework given to us by the African Union in terms of the place of digital technologies for digital education in Africa? Digital education will be looking at where technology touches teaching, learning, research, assessment, and administration in our education institutions and beyond. Having considered, you see, at the African Union level, we will now come down, scale down, and look at Kenya's policy framework on ICT in education and the training. We have a policy framework we'll be looking at, specifically the one developed and promulgated in 2021. The study focus here, when we look at the policy framework on ICT in education in Kenya, will be to focus on policy guidelines that direct us to understand the place of ICTs in education and training in Kenya. So these 3 levels, you see, at the global level, at the African level, and at Kenya's level, specifically focusing on policy framework, we believe that it will help us have a clear understanding of the main issues that arise in terms technologies and education on policy level. Now, the general approach we're going to use is that today evening, we introduce the first part through this brief lecture today. And then, out of my own wisdom, I've thought, as also part of contributing to our assessment, that later we'll be put in groups and will be given a focus. A group will be given a focus on UNESCO. A group will be given a focus on African Union policy guideline. A group will be given a focus on Kenya's policy framework on ICT in education. And a document will be given that should be studied with a specific question that needs to be addressed. And this group will come back and lead a discussion. They'll choose one among them who will come back, lead a discussion that will inform our ventilation around the specific policy framework that we'll be looking at. So that's how we intend to proceed at that point. So this evening, we begin a discussion on really a general understanding on issues ICT and education systems in Africa. So we are looking at a document which actually we are trying to discuss through these slides, a document entitled A Policy Note on Recommended Investments in ICT for Resilient Education Systems in Africa. This is a kind of a study that was carried out to look at issues ICT, especially reflecting on the post-COVID elements that had caught us very unexpectedly around 2020, 2021, thereabout. So the source of this document can be located at the website indicated in the slides. So through this document is actually a summary analysis of the status position on the place of ICT in education in Africa. So it seeks to assess the status, the capacities in some countries that were studied, to reveal how ICTs are used in education, how remote learning especially was conducted during the COVID-19 crisis. Remember, COVID-19 crisis brought us face-to-face with things, with uncertainties that we never expected. In fact, it is in the post-COVID-19 era that these things have become now part and parcel of us. You hear we'll have a Zoom meeting, we'll have whatever meeting. Initially, meetings were more or less face-to-face. A lot of teaching was face-to-face, but COVID-19 pandemic brought us into a situation that gave us some skills. That's what I talk about in the devotion. Some sense of creativity, some sense of beauty within us. Through COVID-19, it seems the creator of the universe unleashed within us certain talents, certain skills that we did not know we have, certain technologies that we didn't know we could use in particular ways. And these talents, this sense of creativity, this inner beauty, these gifts have actually remained with us. So this policy note document is actually an evaluation of about 24 African countries through a study to reveal how in the post-COVID period, we have actually upped the game as regards the ICTs in education and remote learning. It also, this document therefore provides the policy interventions, right? The policy intervention that we need to have so that in our countries, be it Kenya, Uganda, wherever, across Africa and in comparison to the globe, we can be able to come up with interventions that can actually up the place of ICTs in education. That's why, in summary, the document makes about 6 findings that we'll be looking at, upon which 5 recommendations are grounded. Therefore, you notice when you'll get time to read this document, it's a very short document of about 8 pages or so. When you get your time to read this document, the focus, the goal of this study was to examine the extent to which each of these findings and the policy recommendations could actually, help Africa. And for our case, why we learn this, therefore, we want to examine the extent to which the same findings and policy recommendations can be applied to our Kenyan situation and ICT experiences in education in general. So that is in a nutshell what this document in summary talks about. So I've already indicated to you that the lessons we get from the COVID-19 situation, there are lessons that helped us to see education sector was disrupted. Schools were closed in a very unpredictable way, in a manner we did not know. Schools were ordered closed in a manner we didn't know when they're going to be open next. So this situation led us to talk about a learning loss. We lost a period for learning, especially when we consider things to do with timed education outcomes, that these learning outcomes, these educational outcomes are supposed to be realized within the given lifespan, within a given time frame. Now, this COVID situation, as you know, we are setting a preamble to this, resulted into 2 things, both impromptu responses to enable continued learning, as well as long-term responses that would enable continued learning. Now, it is these long-term responses that would enable continued learning that we still fumble through, we still struggle with. And that is where technology penetrates into pedagogy and education. So this situation, this need to have an impromptu and long-term responses to enable continued learning, really led to, or rather has led to, a multi-sectoral national response plans and policy changes in education delivery. This is why, for example, when you look at the ICT policy, the ICT and education policy framework in Kenya, what we mean by multi-sectoral, you find the people from the education sector, people from, the ICT ministry, the ICT sector, coming together, multi-sectoral. We have even the TSC coming in, retooling of teachers and so forth. So the need for multi-sectoral, we have got to look at this. Look at, for example, even the production of the so-called school tablets, multi-sectoral organs coming together to provide a response strategy of how to mainstream technology in and through education. The study objectives, I'm rushing this so that we can be able to discuss the findings. The study objectives of this whole idea was to study, rather to analyze the preparedness of various countries in supporting ICT in education. Second objective was to look at the barriers that hinder the optimal use of ICT in education. Thirdly, to look at the gaps in policies, practices, and infrastructure that hinder the accelerated use of ICT in education. And fourthly, to look at and consider the required investments that would actually bridge what we call the digital divide. Now, this area of the study objectives that informed this policy study that we've talked about, this area is very important because it helps us, for those of us doing some studies on policy issues, This is how we are supposed to look at or evaluate and analyze policies, to be able to see what is the need for that policy. What is the need for that policy? Preparedness of various countries in terms of how they will support ICT in education. So it helps us to be able to see what is the need of that policy. A policy should also address some challenges in terms of barriers that hinder what you want to realize. What is it? What are the issues that summon that policy in place? So in this case, the study sought to look at what are the barriers that hinder the optimal, the maximum use of ICT in education. Policy should address the gaps within either existing policies or existing practices, existing infrastructure that we are considering. So when you talk about a policy, when you study a policy, these are things that should come up. Look at how does that policy address the already existing gaps within a policy that exists. What we mean by this, if you are looking at a policy, if it is whatever education policy, then we should be able to reveal we have some form of policies. What are the gaps within that policy? What are the gaps within practice that are not being addressed by that policy? You see? Then, on that basis, we can now be able to say, how do we address these gaps? In addressing this gap, we are actually solving the problem that we foresaw in the beginning. That's why we talk about what are the required investments that are necessary to bridge the digital divide. So the expected outcome of that policy study was generally to inform the reforms that will be needed in the digital infrastructure and curriculum so as to enhance the education sector's resilience in various countries, especially in the light of the challenges that we had gone through, like in the COVID pandemic and so forth. So that's really the laying ground of that study, that policy study. The scope of that policy note looks at the entire terrain of the education sector. So you find the basic education. For example, in our place in Kenya, you know, various countries define basic education differently. For example, in Kenya here, both primary and secondary education form the two elements of basic education. In some countries, basic education is only primary level and so forth. So the scope of this particular policy study was to look at all the terrain, the entire terrain of education. That's the basic education, secondary education, TVET, and even higher education. The methodology was generally a mixed methodology. If you get time to look at this study and look at it fully, you should be able to see how that methodology was schemed out. Now, this study aimed at looking at about 9 elements. The study examined about 9 elements. The first element was to look at the level of the digital divide. In the 4th and the 5th topic of our course, we'll be trying to look at the concept of that digital divide. You know, digital divide to look at how many people are welcomed at the table of technology in education and how many people are shut out from that table. That's simply a simple explanation of what we mean by digital divide, the level of digital divide. That is how many have access to technology in education and how many do not have access to the same. The second element that the study considered was to look at the existence and the breadth of ICT policies and the strategies in education. By that time, we'll be seeing at, when we look at the findings, Some countries have ICT policies addressing issues of ICT in education. Others do not. These are some of the issues you look at policy. Thirdly, to look at the availability and utilization of ICT infrastructure in learning facilities. So those are two things very critical. When you are considering policy, policy must address itself and order that there shall be ICT infrastructure in our learning facilities. Policy must order itself and really command itself to talk about that ICT infrastructure shall be used. So that, you see, for example, the group that will later come to look at the terrain of ICT and technology in Kenya, the question would be to look at now what we'll call policy divide. Policy talking about there shall be technology use in schools, in teaching and learning, and the practice where you find there are no infrastructure provisions in teaching and learning in our schools. So you can notice that now this policy discussion, policy study was to assess whether ICT infrastructure is available in our learning facilities and whether it is being used. When you're talking about that infrastructure, remember you are talking things internet, you're talking things whether computers are there, whether smartphones are there, and so forth. Remember, the scope of the study was to look at the entire framework of education, right away from basic education to higher education. So the fourth element that was to be considered, or rather was considered, is the digital competency of the education workforce. To what extent, these are now the policy issues, to what extent are our teachers, our instructors competent enough to engage the digital generation in our schools? So what is the digital competency of the education workforce? You're talking about digital competency in form of not only skills, but even the emotional competence, the attitudinal competence, as it were. Do teachers in that school look at technology as a threat, as something negative, or as something positive? The digital competency. Fifth, the policy study considered the availability of electronic systems for learning and assessment. So we are not only talking about instruction, simply, the ICTs in instruction, their use in instructions, but the study also considered to what extent do we have electronic systems that can also be used in evaluation of learning, To what extent can we evaluate our learners electronically? See, that's the question. The sixth consideration is the existence of generic and adapted e-learning, electronic learning materials. We're talking about, do we have a package of this? By the way, for those who in class, the teachers, occasionally when I move around, recently I was traveling through public transport, and you find these gadgets that were in schools, the tablets that were in schools. You find them with the people all over in the streets, in vehicles, public vehicles. You don't know, you really don't know what is happening. Yet you see these gadgets were supposed to have been loaded with what we are talking about in number 6, with the e-learning materials. So what happened to those e-learning materials that were loaded in those tablets? They are no longer accessible to the learners for whom they were initially intended for. So what we're talking about. Number 7, the policy study considered also the existence and participation of partners in supporting the use of digital technology in education. So here we're talking about what are the partners involved? Is it UNESCO? Is it World Bank? Is it IMF? Is it whichever body? What partners exist? Is it some NGOs partnering with some schools to provide this technology infrastructure or something? Number 8, consider the existence of cross-country e-learning programs. This is also something that police should be able to look at. Like what we mean in this number 8, to bring it home, you're talking about the East African community. Could we be talking about what existed sometimes in the early years of independence, just from the colonial time, when we had the East African Examination Council, the East African whatever it is? So if that be what we are imagining, so can we have a cross-country, if you like, a regional e-learning program, regional e-learning evaluation materials? See, that's what we're talking about. Then finally, the policy document considered the challenges that are to be encountered in implementing e-learning, as well as examples of success and stories and best practices that could be looked at. So you see, this policy note looks at a wide range of issues. Now, the focus that I intended us to look at this evening is to look at the fundamental findings of this policy investigation. There are about 6 findings that came up upon which various recommendations were made. The first findings had to do with access to universal and equitable education. The access to universal and equitable education. So the idea here is, how does technology in education, the presence of technology in education, help the methodology, help the pedagogy of education to ensure that as many, that's what we mean by universal, as many people access education as possible. And then equitable, that people from various, various situations, would it be gender, would it be poverty lines, are enabled to access education. And the finding here was, as you can see in that slide, that despite some progress, universal and equitable access to education remains a distant ambition. That's what the policy note discovered. So, friends, as we engage to look at the policy infrastructure in technology and education, ours is to struggle to see how policy is struggling to gap this divide, to bring about equitable access to education, so that into the 21st century, we do not have as many people excluded from education simply because technology limitation cannot be able to help them access this. And this can be understood in various ways. For example, in many places, the policy study discovered there was poor ICT infrastructure penetration. There was also very poor infrastructure resources, especially at school level in various communities. We have, for example, low technology ICT solutions. Think about even radio and television. We no longer have as many radio television programs for learning. This is part of the digital learning, see, technology learning. Therefore, if you look at that policy study, it emphasizes that there is a need to urgently address that infrastructure gap. What do we learn from that finding? When you are talking about policy on matters, technology, and education, a policy must be able to address the infrastructure gaps. A policy must, when you talk about infrastructure gaps, we are talking about, for example, who funds. You're talking about, for example, electrification, rural electrification. You're talking about the high-tech teaching and learning devices. Who funds this? You are talking about personnel capacity gaps. A policy must be able to address that. You're talking about our schools today. How many of our teachers are enabled to do technology-assisted instruction? That's what we're talking about. Therefore, educators need actually to acquire the necessary skills so that they can be able to effectively deliver learning using ICT. So you get that finding is a critical finding that this policy study discovered that we need to reflect about. What are some of your observations in the light of this first finding, students? What are some of your observations in the light of this first policy finding? What is your experience of the access to universal and equitable education through ICT? Yes, I can see. Yes, Madian could comment on that.
I think what I have noted is that when you are speaking of availability of the hardware, the ICT hardware is generally out of reach in terms of use, in the similar way that textbooks were out of reach. And because of its novelty, it is a little bit easy to misuse. So that when you talk about you being in a public transport and you're seeing school tablets out there, it shows you the kind of misuse because of its novelty that essentially makes folks not access universal education in terms of as needed by ICT. Two, I have realized that there are people who will tell you, even students in university will tell you, for me, I still enjoy flipping the covers of a book rather than reading PDF or reading an ebook. So in that case, then there are some limitations to access. But where it is available, then you find that the digital materials apparently can be much more cheaper. I have seen schools sharing PDF documents very quickly and reaching so very many people. And lastly, there seems to be a competition between learning digitally and limiting the, can I say, negative consequences of people being, or young people being on the internet. So there is a certain element of conflict. So that what I would call advisedly dumb tablets or computers, that is tablets that do not have enough capacity to get into the internet, so that the young person may concentrate on maybe a textbook or whatever has been saved into the tablet or the ICT infrastructure, are some of the kind of things that people are grappling with. Then, and sorry, having said finally, let me just add one more thing. The other thing that I'm seeing is that ICT is going too fast. Today you have version 1 of a tablet. Tomorrow people are in 5G. The other day people are in 3G. And therefore, keeping at pace is kind of denying folks universal, and equitable education, so to speak, while at the same time, it is providing a great opportunity to overcome some of the troubles we had when we did not have ICT. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Madiang. Before Waruku gives his comment, we need to reflect on what Madiang has shared with us. My take home from what Madiang has been sharing with us, Madiang has indicated that, you see, you look at the ICT infrastructure in terms of hardware, leave alone the software, the knowledge, and so forth, the attitudinal even. Just looking at the hardware is not there, it's not available. And Madiang uses very well chosen words that ICT hardware is as available as the textbooks were available. So if the challenges we had with the availability of textbooks seems to be the same challenge that we have with the availability of ICT hardware. Now, without repeating what he has said, a critical issue that I picked from that discussion is, from our last class of last week, we observed that knowledge is no longer more or less locked up in books. Knowledge is no longer, as it were, locked up in books. Indeed, it seems to me, if I may use some carefully chosen words, knowledge seems to have escaped from books and is hovering around us. Knowledge is always hovering around us. But how do we tap into this knowledge? How do we tap into it? Competencies are always hovering around us. You know, dear students, think about when you have a problem with your computer in your office, in your room, whatever it is. If you have a problem with your phone and you don't know what to do, and you go to Google and you key in how to do this, and then you get the steps, do this, do this, do this, do this, and you solve your problem. What does that show? The knowledge of solving that your problem is no longer locked up in a book that you don't have in your house or in your library. Rather, the knowledge is hovering all around you. All you need is to tap into that knowledge. Now, we need this technology to tap into this knowledge. But how many have access to that technology which should help us to tap into this knowledge? If you like, if you have to put it differently, how many people have access to the so-called technology-enabled learning? You see, that kind of outlook is what this policy finding is addressing. Matters of access to universal and equitable education. I use these words. Knowledge seems to be migrating from the books around us, and knowledge is coming to walk all around us. It is all around us, but now our eyes seem to be being turned blind. Our hands seem cut from our bodies. Now, we need our eyes. We need our hands, figuratively, to tap into this knowledge. Now, we lack that technology. Those hands, those eyes that I'm figuratively talking about is the technology we need. So that without it, knowledge will always be with us, but we will never actually be able to estimate in our community, or leave alone estimate, we'll never be able to approximate in our communities the level of access and equitable distribution of universal education. Boaz. Waruku?
Mwalimu.
Yes.
Thank you, Mwalimu, and thanks to Madiang for the input. Indeed, my input is not very different. My position was to start with that first finding by Adair. And of course, all of us know Adair has been doing a lot of research as a component of the AU intervention on education in Africa. And I think every research they do is a very serious research, that if our governments would be taking some of the recommendations, we would be making a lot more advances. Having said that, I think this finding, particularly on number one, on the access to universal and equitable education, I underline the fact that they are saying, hey, this is a distant ambition, despite the progress having been made, or that the progress that is being made. Well, they are right. Probably they should, of course, this policy note, definitely they are speaking to policymakers to start thinking along this, to uptake this based on the study they did. So for me, I think what the language should be more encouraging to our ministries, both of education, ICT, and finance. I've started with those three because they are very critical. They are very critical because the education one has got the human resource, the workforce, in as much as they have indicated that even that workforce has got no competency. But that is also where it would be important to see how does that workforce get upscaled on the competency on ICT. The ICT ministry would be very crucial in enabling us having that infrastructure that Madiang actually elaborately talked about. But most importantly, the investments in this venture would be investment that should not be looked at like we are making more money or putting more money into a field that already has a lot of money. Because education, as everybody would know, always receives what they call the lion's share of the budget, and in as much as it is never utilized, all of it there, because they find some excuses to divert some of those funds elsewhere. So for me, I think I would just be looking at one, how do we ensure that the competency that we are saying is deficient in the workforce is built? How do we, that would require even changing the model of training our teachers at the universities and teacher training colleges so that the teaching curriculum also incorporates ICT. And when I'm saying that, you know, ICT is very quick and evolving. But one thing which we should also know is that ICT cannot replace teachers. Sorry, I'm mentioning that because that is a very strong position I've found myself taking in certain platforms. Because there are those who think that if you just have gadgets there and allow learners to access, then they'll be skilled. I think that is where we are also missing it. So it should be looked at from a very developmental prism, where you are able to build the teachers' capacity, but also the infrastructure. Like if you remember, just imagine what would have been the case in Kenya if the one laptop per child became a reality more than 12 years ago. If that would have been a reality, or even if, because at that time, the one laptop per child, there are others, I think, who say that why don't we start with the infrastructure and at least even establish ICT labs first in a school, so that then as you develop the capacity of teachers, they'll be able to drive that. So I'm just imagining if a bit of that would have been done, by now would have been a little bit far. But indeed, ICT is also not supposed to be scary to the teachers and other infrastructure, other instructors at whatever level. It is something that you can fast track the uptake of among the workforce. And for me, I think that is also where we should be looking at how can we quickly do it. And I think avoid making a mockery of ourselves by having ICT ministry running helter-skelter, establishing what they call hotspots and whatever, because I think at best what they're doing, if any works, is just creating sites for pornographic viewing and whatever it is. So they are not really helping us to integrate that into proper learning. So for me, I think it is important. I know there are certain ventures or certain initiatives that have taken this up. Unfortunately, most of those which are serious and investing in education to help are doing it to make money. Look at this guys dealing with Zeraki, a very simple platform that enables just the teachers to be organized in how they do assessments and all. But it's becoming expensive. And you find that it is also being done in a manner that they don't want to devolve that technology. They want to control it because they have interest. They say they have intellectual property rights in it. So they are getting money from it. So anyway, I just wanted to say it is important for us to take this report very seriously. It is just a report that was released last year. I wish that our governments would be taking time even to create that multi-stakeholder space where it is internalized and then they see where we are at. In fact, in Kenya, we should be more advanced if only we were organized, so that then we do not start looking at it in terms of who has what tenders in it to make money. And lastly, I think whatever we do, we should be ensuring that we, starting from that very early age, if we do not facilitate our learners to know that the ICT that we are bringing in is supposed to enable them, is a facilitator, is an enabler of learning, and that the teachers are the ones that would help the meaning to come out of that, we may actually lose our children through that ICT, because that if without that direction, that guidance, I think nobody would be able to direct the learning in a very proper way. Curriculum would not be delivered. Even fake materials may be emerging, because indeed all of us know that there are lots of fake materials that are just spreading all over. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you. Sorry for taking a lot more time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Waruku. That's well said. Osanya.
Thank you.
Osanya?
Mine is a bit brief, Dr. And thank you for our brother, our elder brother, Ruko and Madiang. I heard you well say that this issue needs policy to help in some of the issues, like the infrastructure gaps and training of teachers. To me, I feel there is more to do with the policy formulation. In any case, policies are there. Our main problem could be the stage of policy implementation. In fact, as a country, we are very good at doing policies. And if it's doing policies in this area, and then we can do them. But the problem comes at the stage of implementation, which we need to look into and see what will be really eating us as a country. And then Boaz has touched something to do with the curriculum in the university. For all my 4 years I was in the university, I never had anything to do with the ICT integration in my teaching. I'm fresh from the university, and the first thing you are being told, you ensure you integrate ICT in your teaching. So it was a bit difficult. So again, our curriculum needs to be looked into going into the future. Thank you.
Very well, Osanya. Obadia?
Good evening, sir, and my colleagues.
Good evening. Yes.
Thank you so much for such a productive session that we're having right now, and also for the presentation. I feel like I should air a sentiment based on the access to universal and equitable education. And to me, this matter of ICT and the 21st century technology being integrated in education sounds to me like a parable that is written in the book of Mark, chapter 4, verse 1 to 20, a parable of the sower. And the Bible narrates that the sower went out to sow seed. And we have 4 types of soil that are represented, or that we're reading from the Bible. And I think the sower who came up with the seed, this ICT and its implementation in education, sown it on a ground, the third ground, that is what the Bible says: some seed fell on thorn bushes, which grew up and choked the plant. This whole idea of accessibility and technology in education, I think it's a good idea. And as you said, that knowledge is all over around us. But I'm feeling that the cart is getting before the horse right now, because of a few things that are very key, that are choking the implementation and also the success of accessibility of this education. Number one, I think we have some sociological factors, and those sociological factors would include geographical location, would also include social economical aspect and social political aspect. These, I'm thinking that they're the main 3 things that are really affecting the availability of equitable education, the universal education. I'm looking at a few things that were the university that was launched in Kenya recently. And I think the reason behind that was that every Kenyan would be able to access, that is it the Open Kenyan University, something close to that. The idea behind that was that everyone should be able to access education regardless of where they are, where they come from, where they're coming from. But now if you look at some geographical perspective, some geographical factors, there are still some people in those remote areas who need this education, who need this university more than people who live in Nairobi. But currently, they cannot access to this education. Maybe the reason, some of them do not even have smartphone. They don't know anything pertaining to internet because of where they reside. Looking at the socio-economical factors, queuing in maybe the fact that recently I was watching news and we're talking about the financial bill 2024, and how even accessing data might become a bit complex if implemented. So all those factors maybe that we have from that political arena are dimming, are choking the implementation and also the success of the access to universal and equitable education. Because a typical Kenyan, common mwananchi, will not struggle to buy bundles because they want to attend a class online or to download some materials online instead of maybe buying some KDF or Ngumu to cater for their stomach. I think that a few things should be done, even for those who are currently having the luxury of accessing this universal and equitable education. I think some policies should be formulated around. First of all, the access, what to access. This is now in terms of school. Are you just accessing information because the information is available? Are you a lawyer and because you think that there's some computer science materials are available and you should access them? What do you access? When do you access them? Because also I think some of the platforms that we have, I understand that there is that need that information should be accessed anytime, but I think there should be a limitation. When should a material be accessed on a platform? There is also one thing that I think would be very instrumental. I think the policy makers would pay a keen attention on how ICT in education should improve the papers and the books that were used formerly in education setup, so that we may create a holistic development in a child. I was teaching a class the other day. I'm about to finish. I was teaching a class the other day, and I told the students I assigned them a task to copy in their books. I was so shocked when a student told me, "What the hell is this?" Then I got closer to them. I asked them, "A hell? Why would you say this is a hell?" He said, "Sir, we came here to learn." And I asked him, "What is learning to you?" The kid told me, "Learning is sending notes to my emails." And so I thought that we are maybe misusing technology in education landscape, and there might be need to reinstate and also restore. As we embrace technology, we should also try and see how we can cooperate, we can include the former, some aspects that we used to use in the traditional, quote unquote, traditional education, so that education may be in a position to develop a wholesome citizen.
Yes, noted, Obada. Those are great thoughts. Florence, you'd like to say a few words about this?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm just looking at this point, access to universal and equitable education.
Yes.
And I've been doing some research around special education for a different class. But I'm just looking at, when you're talking about access to universal and equitable education, I'm looking at every child, every learner, whether they have special needs or not. And as I was doing my research, of course, I had to go to the dummy finance bill, which is yet to become an act. So we usually call it a dummy. And I looked at the projection of, first of all, the money that has gone to Ministry of Education has come down, I think, by about several millions. And then when I look at the vote head for special education, which means you need some technology to teach these children, whether they're hearing impaired or otherwise the different special needs they have. They also deserve to be, to receive education. And so if you remove the vote head for special education for primary school, and the last many years, the vote head in the act has been the same amount, and then all of a sudden it doesn't exist. So what will it mean for the child who has special needs, who needs different types of technology to allow them to learn? And yet we are also putting money in the Kenya Institute of Special Education, and then we are putting money for special secondary education schools. Now, if you remove a voted for primary, where will the children from primary come from to go to secondary? So I wanted to just raise this other point, that even as we are discussing technology, are we thinking around also children who are enabled differently, who, as technology advances, there are new ways of helping them learn and be, members of society that, can be able to move around, be able to do other things. So let's say autism and all that. So as I was doing my research, this is what came in as we are looking at this point on universal access and whether really education is equitable across board. And if we're looking at technology, are we stuck only on children who are able-bodied? Because if you look at that, we will worry about the child in Isiolo somewhere or in Kwale somewhere where even the class doesn't have electricity. So all those things. That's my contribution. Thank you, Mwalimu.
Thank you very much, Florence. Indeed, the issues you raise will have a chance to grapple with them a little bit more squarely, I think, in our fourth, fifth topic, when we look at the so-called technology and inclusive education and so forth. So I really must say, I love the contributions we brought up to this finding. We now transit. So before we transit, one thing that comes up in our discussion is actually the divide between policy and practice. You notice that. You see, this finding tells us something about the access to universal and equitable education. To what extent, ICT technologies can be able, are rather able to ensure that universal access, that equitable access to education. And our observations end up indicating that huge gap between even the policies we make at the national level that seem to be well worded and the implementation of those policies. Now, look at the second finding now. Now, the second finding has got to do, we've already looked at some of this, has got to do with the availability and utilization of ICT infrastructure in learning facilities. And the finding here is that there have been various initiatives, yes, for ICT integration in education by both government and other parties. However, due to the so-called outdated and non-existent infrastructure, ICT use in teaching and learning remains poor, and internet connectivity remains a challenge across schools. Now, this one touches something of what Madiang shared with us, the dynamics in ICT development, the ICT development dynamics. We have this, tomorrow we have this. You have this, you think you have arrived. The moment you arrive, you discover the world has taken off. It's at another point and so forth. So, indeed, in addressing issues of availability and utilization of ICT infrastructure learning institutions, we note that, rather, policy needs to note that ICT is no longer a luxury in learning. Indeed, it is one of those main drivers of knowledge, and rather what we call knowledge-based economy. It is one of those drivers. It's not just the way some people now talk about, owning a vehicle when you are doing certain given jobs is no longer a luxury, but what you need. Owning a computer, if you are doing a certain kind of job, if, for example, you are a university donor or something, is no longer a luxury to own a computer or something like that. Therefore, ICT is supposed to really enhance access to quality and equitable education. Yet you see, we are trying to say the ICT that we are having, we are addressing the issue of availability and the use, availability and utilization. So the issue here is either you find the ICT is not there. Sometimes when it is there, computers have been put in that school, nobody knows how to use them or nobody is using them. So we're talking about, you can see, we're talking about the poor ICT in our schools. You're talking about schools that cannot reach out with the internet. We're talking about, even when I'm supposed to teach you, say, from Eldoret, right in town, not in the countryside, but still you struggle with the internet connectivity, which remains really a big challenge. So that's what we are addressing when we are talking about the availability and the utilization of this. We said quite a bit of things. Let's move to the next recommendation here, and then we'll make some observations. The third, not recommendation, but the finding. The third finding has to do with the existence and the depth of ICT policies and strategies. See, the existence, now the policies. Do these policies exist? For example, we are trying to say, what is the terrain in the country, especially before the COVID pandemic? What is the nature of that policy? Like, as we look at the policy that some group will be looking at that was promulgated in 2021, if you were to look at the previous policy that touched on technology and education, what are the gains after the COVID-19 pandemic? So we're talking about looking at the policy, the ICT policies and the strategies that exist, and how deep are they to address this? What Florence has just been talking about, again, the divide between policy and practice. For example, when you talk about education, of that money put in education, how much of this is being pumped into pedagogy? I listened to some politician talking, I think, a few days ago, and what Macho has just been talking about the new, the proposed finance bill, and trying to explain how good it is, because despite what actually Macho is telling us, the figure, the input into education has drastically come down. But you see, the justification is that somebody is trying to justify, in spite of this, we have put a lot of money in education. And look at the explanation, so that we will employ more teachers. Whether it is true or false is another thing to be discussed. But what we are talking about, pedagogy is a very fundamental aspect of education. Don't look at our discussion today simply as ICT. You lose the point. If you want to understand the depth of our discussion today, is that mainstreaming technology, bringing it at the heart of pedagogy, making sure that the instruction in schools put ICT at the center of pedagogy, so that this third finding is about whether these policies exist. For example, policies that can demand budgetary allocation towards that direction. Policies that can demand that certain strategies must be put in place. So here, the main concern of course would be how to mainstream ICT in education. The main concern would be also to try and look at the concept of ICT, not just as an element that tries to put together education and say, for example, the ICT ministry, but rather to mainstream that concept itself, ICT in education, to become a central perspective of education. Like, for example, if you are to talk about TSC with the various sectors within TSC, look at, for example, that division of TSC that talks about, that deals with research, for example, research. How much of TSC's budget is being put not only in putting up, rather in improving the salaries of teachers, but rather in doing what we can call CPD, continuous professional development, whereby the continuous professional development will give more focus on really enabling the teachers to be techno-savvy, to be able to integrate technology in pedagogy. So that's, again, something that we really need to reflect upon. The fourth finding has to do with the partners. Now, this is a bit external, has to do with the partner support. So indeed, there are some countries, as you can see in the finding there, some countries really have received support from various local, national, regional, and international partner agencies. We're talking about NGOs, we're talking about, talking about various national grants and so forth and so forth. Now, what is perhaps more important is to see how these resources, and many of us have already observed that, to see how these resources have been utilized to up the game at the level of policy, technological connectivity. We've talked about the hardware, software, the level of learning materials, the level of training, the preparation of the educators, and so forth. So ours is to ask, to what extent, we're not just asking whether there are partners, but to what extent are the partners putting their shilling, their dollar at the right point? To what extent is that partnership in terms of, say, funding, getting to the right point? That's if you look at it at a funding level. If you look at it as knowledge investment, then you are trying also to ask, to what extent is the technology coming in best suited to the requirements of those learners or to the country curriculum? To what extent? Of course, by and large, we must ask the ultimate question, or rather state the ultimate statement, that whoever pays will always demand for his interests to be looked into. Therefore, where do we put the balance between donor support and the donor interest vis-a-vis the interests of the countries or societies that are being supported? Where do we put the divide when you look at this? Where do we put that divide when you consider this? Where do you put the divide between donor interests and actually the interests of the nation or the interests of the education system in the country? And a comment on that, please. And a comment on that. Partner support. What do you think are the emerging issues when you look at partner support for the use of ICT in education? What are the pros? What are the cons that you wrestle with in this? Othello?
Yeah, Dr. I may take you back to where we were talking about equitable education. To me, equitable, it is a pipe dream. This is what equitable. I don't know, it's like justice. It may never be achieved in our time. It's always in search. It's something that we are searching for. To reach to where maybe our other brothers in advanced countries are, or reaching near them, will require selfless leaders who will invest in education in their citizens and not leave education to the private sector wholesale. And then when it comes to funding education, we don't want to fund education because it's a government thing. And so we have that problem, that equitable word exists on paper, it's not in reality. And so we have a problem of delivering this aspect of ICT. You need to have people who are trained to teach the ICT program in schools. You need to have, it's not just a matter of sending tablets to school. When we started the class, that's the first question that came to my mind. I wanted to ask you, and you already mentioned it in your presentation, that where those tablets are. Because it's not enough for you to put tablets in school. You need to have people who are trained to service those tablets and to train. You don't even have the infrastructure. Electricity in remote places, we don't have electricity. And so if you look at in recent times, if you do a study on people who have been trained well, you will find the private sector is actually at the forefront in training people more than in the government sector. When you put people in government school, you hardly see these teachers in class. And this is a problem we are having. We have another class on Friday, whereby we are accessing a lot of documents from UNESCO on human rights, especially the right of the child to education and things like that. If you look at those reports that are there by UNESCO and other UN bodies, actually when you look at sub-Saharan Africa, it's very depressing. To make policies, you must rely on data. And when it comes to data, it's very poor in Africa, especially south of the Sahara. We have only 15%. In the world, we have only 15%. So we are not doing research. This is a big problem that we are having, which when I read it was very depressing. Thank you.
Very well. Nyabere, you'd like to add your voice on this, Nyabere?
Thank you, Doc. And I just wanted to make a quick contribution. You are wondering what the position is regarding the partner support. And I wanted to suggest that investing in the ICT infrastructure is very expensive, but it's doable. Now, the challenge that makes the partners shy away from supporting this venture is the possibility that their venture might not be sustainable. And this is because of the nature of ICT. You see, take for example, I'm thinking if there is a church or a Christian organization or a religious organization in Busia that wants to support a school in coming up with, let's say, an ICT laboratory, they might be able to buy a few computers here and there, but they will need the school to be connected to the internet. And you will find that this internet connectivity is not within the reach of this religious institution, which means that they will have to depend on other organizations for their venture to be successful. So when you think about these logistical nightmares, you might find the explanation as to why there has been very little or no partner support in this area of ICT infrastructure. That would be my thought.
Right. Very well, Sam. Now, Cindy, you'd like to put an idea on this.
Oh, Prof, I forgot to lower my hand because Sam Nyambere said exactly what I wanted to say. I was talking about, I was saying it's one thing for the use of ICT to be supported, and it's one thing for it to be sustainable, because assuming that, let's say, a school has been provided with everything else apart from the connection, that is internet, you realize that it will not be very useful, simply because the computers cannot be used without the Wi-Fi. So the sustainability of the ICT in the education is the biggest question.
All right, very well. So let's make a little bit of move, and then we'll come to, I saw Sindan your hand, I'll give you some chance in a moment. Now, the fifth finding has to do with the level of the workforce digital competence. The idea here is, what is the digital competency, for example, of teachers in schools? What is the digital competency of the administrators of that educational institution? So the issues to note here, as you can see from the slide, that two things. There exists a lot of skill gaps within our educational institution. This skill gap can normally sometimes manifest itself through the inability to connect and access digital facilities, and also the lack of readiness for the rapid transition to this remote, or rather technology-assisted learning. So skill gap is an issue which manifests itself once more again, the inability to connect. Sometimes you see you have this infrastructure in schools, but it cannot be used. People are unable to use them. And this one goes hand in hand, what somebody mentioned earlier. What training goes into, for example, into a teacher when he's in training, what we call the pre-service training. And after the pre-service training, when somebody's already at it, what is the level of what we call the, if you like, the post-service, what sometimes we call CPD, the continuous professional development? What is the level of continuous professional development? And how does this cater for the technologies necessary for pedagogy in classrooms or in schools? For example, right now, a practical example, teachers for junior secondaries now in our country, all over you hear they are going for retooling. Find out what happens during that retooling. Look at the trainers who train them. Even those trainers who train them, they have no idea about technology in education. It is not one of those things that they are talking about. It is simply reading manuals and so forth. This is actually what we are addressing. That it is true, countries may have invested extensively in infrastructure to support their vision for digital learning with varying degrees of success. However, the implementation of that digital teaching and learning, still when you look at it as revealed during the pandemic, is highly impeded by the lack of ICT-ready capacity among the teachers, among the educators. This is something we need to look at. And you can imagine, if that lack of capacity exists for the educators, for the teachers, what situation will the learners find themselves in? What situation will actually the learners find themselves in? The last of the 6 findings have to do with the evidence of learning assessment for learners in primary and secondary schools, if you like, basic education. What this finding is talking about is that we are not only talking about instruction, learners being taught in schools through technology-assisted instructions, but we are now asking, what is the level of penetration as regards assessment, evaluation of learners? To what extent, for example, are our institutions, even institutions of higher learning, to what extent are they enabled to carry out learner evaluation through technology-assisted models? And you can see from our slide here, it was actually discovered that it was not evident from the study that learners in primary, learners in secondary schools participated or were involved in any kind of examination to assess the learning uptake and so forth. So you see, this is something that we also need to look at. So we are talking about when we model a curriculum, that curriculum must explicitly on talking about the place of technology in how that curriculum will be delivered. And then, not only delivering it, how also technology will be used in terms of evaluation. It is on this basis, therefore, that the policy study makes about 4 recommendations. And remember, I think it is Waruk who said, the document we are trying to look at is a very recent document, which came out last year, 2023. Therefore, this is a policy document that as you look at any ICT policy document in education, this should be a flashpoint that should be able to come back to talk about. So 4 recommendations come up that actually mirror those findings that we've been talking about. 1, they need to build appropriate supporting infrastructure. They need to build really appropriate supporting infrastructure. Second, they need to prioritize sound pedagogy. And on this one, I add, you see, a pedagogy that can be able to unite technology and the so-called 21st century learning. Remember, the most effective pedagogy today is not just a pedagogy that helps you to cover the material. We are talking about a pedagogical frame that can be able to help you as you teach, say, agriculture, you teach history, you teach mathematics, you teach science, whatever you are teaching, you teach CRE, to be able to maneuver those 21st century competencies. We're talking about creativity, we're talking about critical thinking, we're talking about problem solving. So the idea here is, how does technology come in to enable us teach our content while at the same time being able to deliver those 21st century competencies? Therefore, we need to build an appropriate supporting infrastructure that will be able to ensure that, and be able to prioritize sound pedagogy that will attend to those issues. Thirdly, we need also to put in effort, and these are the things we've been talking about in our discussions. We've also talked about budgetary allocation and so forth. Therefore, we need to train educators. We need to train teachers on how to use ICT effectively to support instruction. It is not the issue of, in that school, some NGO came in and built, a computer lab, and they put there, say, 50 pieces, 100 pieces, and so forth. It is not an issue of a head of a school boasting around, I have a computer lab fitted with 50 computer pieces and so forth. I have 20 laptops, I have this, I have internet connectivity in my school, I have electricity. That's not enough, and it's not what we're talking about only. We're talking about what is the level of preparedness of those teachers in that school, of those educators, to use ICT effectively. We're talking about today in the country, when you think about the CDs, the county directors of education, when you look at not simply their knowledge, but when you look at their attitude, what is the attitudinal preparedness to accept and enforce ICT use in their counties? Therefore, we need to train educators. That's what we are underlining. The last recommendation made here is that we need to build the overall ICT capacity, the overall ICT capacity. So this is now a big thing. You're talking about that training, you're talking about, not just training teachers, not just having the hardware, but we need now that enabling environment in terms of attitudes, in terms of internet connectivity. As somebody said, internet connectivity, something that would go beyond a school, will go beyond a donor, is now talking about holistic examination of the policies within a country and so forth. So these 4 recommendations come out in that report as things that we need seriously to consider when we are looking at any ICT policy. Now, based on those recommendations, therefore, there are a few priority areas that the policy study puts forth as areas for investment. 5 critical areas or 5 priority areas for investment based on the findings and based on the recommendations. So here, we are not just talking about the recommendation, do that, but what is it that need to be attended to almost immediately? So we have 5 areas that, we have 5 areas that actually we need to respond to. But perhaps before we do that, I can see some hands up. Maybe Sindani, I start with you, Meshak. Would you like to say something about this, Meshak?
Yeah, good evening, Prof, and everyone. There's a point that came up on partners, and I think some tried to bring out one of the issues that might come, the issue of sustainability, but still, I would think that sometimes these partner agencies may have their own agenda and priorities, which sometimes influences the direction in which now this integration in education takes. For example, I happen to be in an institution which has been lucky to have a number of partners, including the Chandaria Foundation, which brought in an aspect of the LEAP Hub, something to do with innovation and entrepreneurship. And the equipment that was brought was elaborate, and it was being used for learning, for research and all. But the partner had an agenda. There is something the partner is seeking, and the project collapsed barely 5 years after it was initiated. So the issue of agenda alignment, and when you look at some of the most disadvantaged schools in this country, I've had a partner who comes in and wants to bridge this gap, but they disappear after their agenda has been met and the school is left hanging. But then I still ask myself, government has been doing a lot of work in terms of equipping schools with equipment in ICT. But my question is, what is the criteria that the government or the ministry is using? Because again, my school has so much, including internet, free internet that has been for the past 10 years, smart screens for teaching and learning. But my neighboring school, they hardly have anything. They have a computer lab with outdated equipment, yet these are schools within the same structure of governance. And finally, I think this goes down to leadership, because now the regions, our regions where we work and probably where these schools are distributed, there is a regional director of education, there is a regional director of the TSC. Now, some regions are having very serious capacity building in technology integration, but others are not. Again, I ask myself, is it that this is not a universal or unified program? Is it the initiative of the regional director? Because some regions have very, very many trainings in ICT integration. And finally, I don't know if at the onset, did we define what ICT integration is? Because earlier we talked about having gadgets, having internet. What is actually ICT integration in education? Thank you, Dr. Ariobati.
Thank you very much. Perhaps Waruku, you'd like to perhaps weigh in and address some of those emerging issues. Waruku?
Thank you, Mwalimu. I may not ably address some of those other issues. I wanted also to throw in one of the spanners there. And particularly this is on one of the recommendations on how to prioritize pedagogy. And for me, I think based on the experience I've had with ICT, I know there are quite a number on board here without really trying to make you look bad in any way. But my experience is such that the training of ICT gurus, the persons and the professionals in that field, has largely been done in a way that if you look at how they would be able to transform that and ensure that they contribute to the development of pedagogy and ICT, just to improve on the delivery of education. There could be the challenges. I think practical examples, some of you might have realized, anytime you encounter a problem, a challenge with your ICT equipment, a phone, a laptop, desktops, whatever, instead of these ICT people telling you or helping you understand what could be the problem, so that you are able to learn, and then in case you encounter such a problem, you can fix it. They'd rather they just actually take and fix. And at any time you ask, can you just show me and just help me understand what this is? I think I've encountered this in more than 80% of the people that I've encountered. I don't know. Then that could, to me, is part of the challenge that we'll be encountering. I was involved in some study on this institution that was calling itself Bridge International. It was delivering curriculum international. They claimed it was international curriculum. It came with a tablet or a package that was already installed and all. And you wanted really to interrogate it, even access it in a way that you can be so certain that the material being exposed or our learners were being treated to a material that were relevant, curriculum, which is also very appropriate for the learners that were, but it was not easy to do so. So, Mwalimu, that is the span I'm just trying to throw in there, the practicality of dealing with that, because we need to have it addressed. Thank you.
Yes.
Mwalimu, may I say something because of that?
Yes.
Yeah. I was holding back, and maybe some people here, maybe only Waruku knows. In my other life, I am a children's writer. And one of the bad experiences I had with ICT integration in schools was with the same Bridge International that Waruku is talking about, in that they came up with pre-installed tablets, which I don't mind, in the slums, and the government and lots of people have had quite a number of issues with the quality of the programs. But one of this donor issue that I had is that one day I went to a school in Koru, and I found my book actually had been digitized. My children's book had been digitized and installed in these tablets as a black and white offline material without, copyright issues having been followed up. So sometimes there's issue with ICT and the donor issues. And I think the reason they were getting is what Waruku is talking about, was the content that they brought practical and localized to the country. And so then they say, okay, for us, we've brought the tablets. Now let's look at Kenyan material to put in. And then they don't go through the requisite processes. So sometimes donors can be exploitative, which is not a good thing. Over to you.
Yes, I think part of these final submissions, right, you can see the priority areas are really clearly set before us. But these conclusive remarks seem to focus on about 2 things that I can pick. The first one is the need for pedagogical literacy. That is, 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 the need for pedagogical literacy. That is The first thing is that however much we talk about this ICT, the technology-assisted teaching and learning, one thing we must appreciate is that ICTs, that's information communication technologies, remain still a mystery. You know, those of you who've been involved in some kind of lobby activism, educational lobby activism, advocacy, so to say, will recognize, actually will find what we are discussing to be really, you know, building castles in the air. Because you see, we're talking about a greater percentage of learners in this country, a greater percentage of learners in sub-Saharan Africa, who first of all cannot access even the concept of schooling. You know, I'm careful not to say cannot access school, because then somebody would say, by virtue of ICT, we need not talk about, you know, physical schooling. But rather, even the concept of schooling itself, they're still handling very mundane, you know, concerns of, you know, concerns of hunger, famine, whatever, clothing, whatever it is. So you see, that's why I say one issue that comes up is that the place of information communication technologies in education still remains a mystery. How do we talk in some of those remote parts of sub-Saharan Africa about ICT integration? Yet you see these people, even the concept of a teacher himself or herself, the concept of learning itself is non-existent. You see, how do we talk about ICT integration and penetration into pedagogy when, for example, you are thinking of parts of this country where, you know, people still involved in cattle rustling, you know, whatever, you know, people still involved in very serious insecurity issues and so forth. What I'm trying to say, you know, it seems now ICT integration into education comes out as really a third order concern, where the first and second order concerns to people are still not addressed, as it were. So that is something that comes up. I say two things. So that thing comes out very clearly. ICT in education still remains a mystery. I'm not calling it a mirage, but a mystery. It is something even educators themselves are yet to understand what this is all about. Then the second thing that comes out of our discussion is that to really appreciate the fact whoever pays the piper calls the tune. Whoever pays for this ICT commands what ICTs will be used for. And part of what actually, Madiang, you are addressing there, and even Waruku, part of what you are addressing, you see, you are talking about an organization that comes and it has already pre-inserted content in particular ways. Now, we are not even talking about even that pre-inserted content. It's about how those gadgets will be used, because pedagogy is about the how. We are even discussing how will those gadgets finally be used. Even if you packaged it with the right information, what is the level of preparedness? Do you prepare teachers, or do you still simply just bring in computers and so on? That is why when you look at these priority areas for investment, you notice the policy study mentions the concern for investing in critical infrastructure. Call it internet coverage, call it electrification, call it whatever you want to call it, bundles, who provides the bundles and so on. But besides that, I feel the second priority area is an issue, again, to be looked into. In fact, it could have a greater priority over number one. That is the competency of teachers and school administrators to be really receptive to ICT. This competency is not only the technological skills, what to press on a computer, how to fix this and this. Waruku, you already talked about that. But you see, at the lowest level, we are looking at what we can call the attitudinal preparedness of our teachers. You're talking about going to schools, and I've shared with you this before, where you find science teachers even do not have test tubes in the laboratory, or in the whole school, they have 3 test tubes. And the way they handle it and threaten the learners lest they break them, nobody ends up learning science. Do we get what I mean by attitudinal preparedness? How is this science teacher's attitude, kind of predisposed to teach science? That's what we're talking about, attitudinal preparedness, not just the skill competency in these teachers and administrators. Then we're talking about the need to integrate ICT into teaching and learning. So that is actually what I think it was Nyabere who brought this up. We hope we are going to have some topic towards the end that looks at this ICT integration into teaching and learning. Now comes the elephant in the house, which I've talked about. Very simple. Address hunger, address poverty, address income inequalities in our societies. That's what I'm trying to say. In fact, that is where I began. If we don't address number 4, sure, ICTs and their place in education, learning, and teaching will always remain a mystery, will always remain something that teachers don't understand. You go to that school and say, I've come here, we want to come in as an NGO to talk to teachers about ICT integration in education. And the headmaster tells you, we thought you have come here to bring some food for our learners. We thought you've come here to contribute to the lunch program in our school, at least to keep our learners in school, instead of telling us about how you'll bring us computers and LCDs to teach in classrooms. Of course, finally, we're talking about the need to build collaborations and a partnership for ICT in education, but we add the need to build the correct collaboration and the correct partners for this. So, dear friends, this is the kind of approach I want us to have as we plan to look at ICT integration and the ICT policy framework as regards really education and our classrooms and so forth. So this is really the kind of impression that we need to have. Now, does anybody have any comment you'd like to make before I put another sharing for now? Anybody? Boaz, is your hand still up?
No, Mwalimu, if it is up, it should be lowered, sorry.
Okay, fine. So we've come to the end of that discussion. I want to project something else that should move into next week, should move us into next week. So I was asking in case there is any observations that somebody would like to make and so forth. Any observations? No, perhaps not. Right. So the next consideration, which I want to just project now. Just a moment, and I'll be there. Yes, here I am. Yeah. So having listened, I hope my Word document has been projected towards you. I don't know why it is so skewed. All right, it's fine. I hope that Word document is before us. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, having done that introduction, there remains 3 sections of that topic. As I had explained, the first section is about the UNESCO policy guideline. The second section is about the African Union policy guidelines. And the final part is about Kenya's policy framework on ICT in education and training. I should be finishing this, going through this maybe under 5 to 10 minutes, we should be done. Now, the part that deals with the UNESCO policy guidelines, I've chosen this part so that it represents the global view, I call it task 1. In this task, we will be required to read UNESCO's work on ICT in education policy. Is a PDF document that can be located at the source that is indicated before us. It's about 17 pages, the PDF document. The focus while reading this document will be on why do we need policy on ICT issues in education. So UNESCO document will give us a justification for ICT policies. Policy on ICT issues in education. So I call that, actually the way I put it, task 1. I'm calling it task 1, rather 3.1, to indicate is the first task in the third topic. So after reading this document, we will be required to respond to these 2 issues. Just a moment. Great. Okay, now. So after reading that, that document, we will be required to respond to these 2 issues. The first one will be to analyze the 4 policy level recommendations that have been put in that document. That document gives us 4 policy recommendations. That is a policy recommendation on government support, policy recommendation on inclusion, equity, and gender equality, policy recommendation on quality and innovation, and so forth. I don't need to go through, they come away. And then, for practical purposes, we'll be required to consider what conditions need to be put in place to ensure the effective implementation of the recommendations within that document. In fact, I have guided here, see the last part of that document. So that will be the first task. The second task will deal with the African Union policy guidelines. So we are coming from the global level, coming home, as I said in the introduction. Here, we'll call this the second task, which is 3.2, the second task within the third topic. The concern here will be to read the document, the African Union's document entitled the Digital Education Strategy and Implementation Plan. It can be located at that source indicated. So I make a general introduction to that, and then I summarize the focus of that document, which is threefold. 1, it focuses on the concept of digital technology appropriation in education. Second, to empower really, the citizen, people will use it. And thirdly, build capacity building for the AU member states and so forth. Now, I put the task again here. The task will be twofold again. That within that document, I ask that we analyze both the enablers and the inhibitors of digital education in Africa. What are these things that enable? What are the opportunities? This document is supposed to help us recognize the possibilities in the midst of obstacles to digital education in Africa. Then within the same length, I say, with reference to policy guidelines to digital teaching and learning in Africa at this site, in comparison with the past, discuss what you consider, discuss what you think ought to be done to overcome each of the inhibitors that is indicated. That will be our second task. The third task, which I call the third task 3.3, that's the third task in the third topic, will be focusing on Kenya's policy framework on ICT in education and training. Here, I request that we'll have to read the Republic of Kenya Ministry of Education 2021 Policy on Information and Communication Technology in Education and Training. The sources provided is a 2021 document, policy document. And the focus for reading would be a few selected pages. You can see a few selected pages. You see, these pages would actually be, if you like, would end up actually being pages, about 20 pages or so of that policy document. And the task here is we need to outline the specific policy objectives and critically assess the practical challenges involved in realizing each of these policy objectives. And then, reflecting on this, our personal contribution, learning contribution, would be to try and provide a reasoned assessment of what we foresee to be the future of this policy document. Remember now, this is the policy that guides us on ICT technology in education. Now, what I've done, let me see if I'm able to get this, so you get those three thoughts. Let me see. I don't know whether I have this. Chances are I don't. Just give me a moment. Give me a moment. Look at this. In a few moments, I should be done. Yes, in a few moments, I should be done. I hope. Okay. Let me try and see. Yes, here I am. All right. Let me see. Yes, here I am. Share. You can see some Excel document before us.
Yes.
Very good. So what I've done, what I'm expecting is that we are going to have some groups, and this the way, I'll make also a write-up about what I'm explaining. This is the way we're going to do it. I'll send this document out, and I've formed some groups, this 1, 2, 3, I think 4, 5, 6, I think 6 groups and so forth. So group 1 will be tasked with the task 1. Not everybody looks at every task. Group 1 will be tasked with the task 1. So you will be required to go through that task, look at it keenly. After you've looked at it very keenly, you make a presentation. You know, I'm trying to see if we can break the monotony of monologue lectures. So you can choose a team of people, whether there are 2 or 3. You'll be given about 30 minutes or so in the next class. So group 1 will present the first task, task 3.1. They'll ask one of them to present that task. Group 2 will present that task 2. They'll be given about 30 minutes. Group 3 will be given another maybe 30 minutes, or really maximum of 30, but even 25 should do. So you can be able to make a few slides, maybe 5, 6 slides should do, to be able just to explain the highlights while focusing on the main question, on the main task that is given. So after that presentation, we will have a discussion of your presentation to up the game. It should be learning, and you'll be required to edit that and be able to present, and then you'll be evaluated. I know people have indicated to me that working in groups is very difficult. I have struggled with that reality, and then I have been bombarded with the reality that the course we are doing emphasizes something about collaborative learning. And that's why I'm wrestling with the fact that still an element of this collaborative learning must come in. What I would observe is that it should be very easy to work as a group in the sense that when you look at the documents, you can be able to agree that so and so you will begin by looking at this. So and so you'll begin by looking at this and so forth. You present this and so forth. And should be able to have about 5 to 6 slides presented and discussed and so forth. Therefore, before I end this class, I wish to mention that I'm going to post the task and I'm going to post these issues. You notice what we require ready for next week is up to task 3. There, up to task 3. This should be done, that is group 1, group 2, and group 3. Up to task 3 should have worked to give us a presentation, a discussion for next week. And then I should be able to send a task, guided task I will be, and I'll remain on WhatsApp through the week in case somebody wants to ask a question, I should be able to respond. Any query? Any query? All right, it's understood. I invite a volunteer to close for us with a word of prayer.
Excuse me, before you close, Dr. The rest of the groups, when is that? Like from 4, 5, when do we have the presentation?
Now, this one is going to be sent. Actually, the number 4 represents a topic. You notice? So those who are from 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, so that each one of us is included. These ones will be tackling topic 4 and 5 because topic 4 and 5 is united within these 3 groups. However, the tasks are ready. I should be able to send it anytime, including the same time I'm sending the task for next week.
Okay.
Okay. Can a volunteer pray for us, please?
Okay, Dr. I can pray.
Thank you, Juliet.
Okay, Lord, we thank you so much for this day and for the lesson that we've had. And we thank you that each and every Wednesday, Tuesday, we meet here, Lord, to learn you, continue to give us new information. And we also thank you for our lecturer that has been guiding us well with a lot of wisdom and knowledge, even in this area. We pray that, Lord, even as instructors that we are, and even some of us that are in different areas, you will help us and guide us, and even give us the wisdom and the grace we need to bring this knowledge into practicality, Lord. So guide us. We pray that you give us the grace that will help us, even as we carry on with the studies, in the midst of many challenges, God, and businesses of the day, Lord. At times it becomes hard even to juggle through these activities, but we trust in your divine grace that it will carry us through until the end. So bless us, Lord, even as we will be resting this night. We pray that you keep us and guide us. We also pray as we wait for the next day and the days to come, Lord, as we soldier on in this journey, that your grace shall be sufficient. In Jesus' name we pray and believe. Amen.
Amen and good night.
Amen.
Amen.